and welcome to KnightHunter Books. It's been a bit of a long time no see. We are still in our same old house. We do have a moving date though. We're sort of half living in boxes at the moment.
And will be for another month.
Yay! But we still have these bookshelves. So we have read a few books. We've probably got a few more videos coming soon with wrap-ups and hauls and that sort of thing. But we thought we would do one today on the Novelettes that we read. So these are the Hugo nominated works for 2019, and there are 5 that were nominated, and we have both read all of them. So we can share our thoughts. We've put any links down below where you can get them from. I think all but one are free, so worth checking out if you like the sound of them.
And we'll try to keep these as discussions of the books rather than necessarily try and describe the plot too much.
Yeah, so relatively spoiler free.
First up is When We Were Starless by Simone Heller. This story follows some survivors, nomads living in the ruins of a post-singularity civilization, using some of the tools of their forebears in limited ways with very limited understanding. And that understanding is reinforced by a culture that decries anything new. The protagonist learns to challenge this view and ultimately ends up being quite a hopeful book.
One thing I quite liked about it, I think that made it slightly more on the sweet side. I mean, there are some scares in it,
Yeah.
but there is an element of kind of found friendship as well, of a kind of unlikely pairing, which is quite sweet. It is quite a weird story.
You're very much just dropped into this world.
Yeah, so I think that was the thing that meant I didn't score this quite as highly, was that it just took me a bit of time to kind of ground myself and feel like I had any idea what was going on. But I think in the end I found it rewarding for that, so it kind of paid off. I rated it 3.75 stars.
I'd be quite interested to read a novel that this is the prequel to.
The next one was my favourite. It's called The Thing About Ghost Stories, and it's by Naomi Kritzer, who is probably my favourite short story writer. I rated it 4.5 stars. It was amazing. It's very close in its focus, and it's set in kind of a modern day America, and the protagonist is a woman who is studying ghost stories, kind of in the terms of folklore and kind of urban legends.
And it was quite interesting to me, having read Shauna Maguire's indexing, to see references to this idea of cataloguing different stories in terms of why we tell them and what messages they carry.
Yeah, so that for me was quite an interesting kind of base to the story, but then it really heightens the emotion because it then kind of interlinks with her own story of what she's been through with her mum, who had a kind of slow, steady decline into Alzheimer's.
So that kind of separation of bereavement and death, which was quite interesting.
Yeah. It had a really kind of heart-wrenching ending that was super satisfying.
We did both arrive wherever we were going in floods of tears.
Yeah, I was reading in the car and we just had to like sit in the car park for like a few moments, just go So yeah, I loved it. It's written in a very kind of chatty way as well, which means that I just flew through it.
Next up is The 9 Last Days on Planet Earth by Daryl Gregory, which is, as you might expect, a series of even shorter stories which tell the story of a slow apocalypse. Alien seeds arrive and slowly start to change and shift ecosystems left, right and centre. The protagonist ends up studying these and being quite influential, but not through their ability to actually do the science, but through communicating science and influencing policy, which I thought was quite an interesting lens to look at it through.
However, I'd say doesn't feel like as a story that's really its focus. That only really comes in the last few. It's spread over such a huge amount of time. So it starts when he's very young and kind of goes through his life. I found him a bit of an annoying protagonist in his teenage years, which doesn't mean it's a badly written teenager, but...
Teenagers are annoying,
yes.
Who'd have thought?
There's a really lovely romance story in there, and some queer representation. I just found it kind of middly. I rated it 3.5, so yeah. I liked it. I think I liked the Vandermeer-y kind of elements to it, this biological apocalypse.
Probably part of what they were trying to do when writing this was the contrast between kind of the very human story that it was focusing on with this kind of slow apocalypse in the background. But the slow apocalypse kept on getting in the way of the human story by being more interesting, and the human story took front and centre and sort of stopped you seeing more of what was going on around the slow apocalypse.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed this story, but only once I'd got about halfway in and cared about that main character, because that's who it's really about. The next one is The Last Banquet of Temporal Confections by Tina Connolly, which was again one of my favourites. I rated this 4 stars. This had a really fun structure of, it was set over a meal, and the main character is a taste tester for the Tyrant King, and her husband is the pastry chef. But he's found a way of giving his confections a path to memories, so each person will go to a different memory, but obviously she's there so that he can't just make everyone have a horrible memory, because she'd have to experience it too. There's a lot of tension, because you want to find out how it's going to end, and like trying to work out what's going on and what messages he may be trying to send her. But I just really, it was quite kind of cosy and cute, like the actual... No?
What with the creeping fascism and the torture?
Oh, okay, maybe not. We'll take that back.
That's fine.
Their relationship was like...
Yeah.
I don't know, it was just a mix.
You only saw them together in memories a couple of times. But yes, they had that kind of supportive relationship.
So I really liked the story. I think it had a really nice balance to it. It was quite a kind of typical fantasy setting, but there was kind of enough interesting things going on that didn't spoil it for me, I guess.
Yeah. Next up was If at First You Don't Succeed, Try Again by Zen Cho. This is a type of story that honestly I did not know I needed and need to read more of. It's cute. It's really nice.
It goes somewhere you're not expecting.
It really does. If you were looking at sort of tags for this story, you would probably read as urban fantasy / paranormal romance, Asian inflected, FF.
But your point of view at the start is a mythical creature, who's, very old, very grumpy, kind of focused, thinks of humans in the way you'd expect.
A near immortal creature with lots of power.
And one thing I liked in this story is kind of... So again, similar to some of the others, I didn't like this quite so much because it took me a bit of time to get into it, because for me it felt like the story took a little bit to get going and to get to where it wanted to be. But one thing I did really enjoy was there are quite a few moments where the story reminds you just quite how inhuman that protagonist is.
Yeah.
Which is done quite well.
Yeah.
And it's really cute.
Yes.
One of those that, once I was into it, I could have happily kept reading for much longer than it was. And then the last one is The Only Harmless Great Thing by Brooke Belander, which is the longest of the stories, about 90 pages.
The only one I think you currently have to pay for.
Yeah. I rated it a 3.5 stars, so it was... I'm glad I read it, but it wasn't really for me. I think there was like a really good story in there. I maybe lacked from not knowing history, American history. I'm not very good at history. So I lacked some context, which again, it just didn't it didn't give any of that to you. It kind of expected you to infer it or to know it.
I wonder if in part I benefited on this. There was quite a splash made about this when it came out. So I think I probably read on John Scalzi's blog the big idea piece that Brooke wrote about this, and yeah, there's lots of, you get the impression that Brooke is kind of a magpie. Lots of different ideas taken from all over the place. So I think there are some elephants that have been taught a limited number of signs, but nowhere near the number of the elephants in this. Radium girls existed, and they led to some of the legislation around workplace safety. There were completely mental ideas explored to try and keep the nuclear waste depositories safe over millennial timescales. Elephant song can be heard 200 miles away and months after elephant sang.
So they've just taken all those ideas and kind of turned them all up to, I'd say 11, but 12.
Yeah, possibly.
It also jumped between a few different points of view and kind of timescales. Well, it's 3 different stories really, which I don't get on as well with, but they were very interesting stories, each of them.
I think in part helped that I tend to read slightly faster and in slightly bigger chunks. If you're reading short chunks, stories that chop and change you're going to struggle with, I imagine, more.
So yeah, really, really interesting one. If you're interested in any of those things, go for it.
So, in theory, we should have time to read the bulk of the Hugo nominated works before voting closes. I might even have time to read a reasonable chunk of the series Hugo, which is slightly crazy, though that helps that I've already read at least one of them in totality. If we were to do another one of these videos about a different category, which one would you be most interested to see? Because given the frequency with which we're making videos at the moment, we've probably got about one more left before voting closes.
And if you read any of these, or if you have already read any of these, then I'd love to, hear what you thought of them. So put those down in the comments.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon.